Welcome, everyone. Welcome to ARTIVISM, the Power of Art for Social Transformation. We have with us today Andrea Samantha Paltzer, development professional, impact entrepreneur, and NGO founder. She is zooming in from London. Carolina?
Hello, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And we're in for a treat. Ms. Paltzer, thank you for all the wonderful work that you are doing and continue doing. Particularly, I'm very pleased for all the work that you're doing in Nicaragua, and I can't wait to hear all the back portion of it and how all Chureca Chic came about. Again, welcome to all. And as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded for future access for educational purposes on YouTube. Professor Arjit, please.
Okay, so Ms. Paltzer, you may begin.
Well, thank you so much, Carolina, for reaching out, and thank you to RG as well for hosting me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and just very honored that you reached out and asked me to share a little bit about the work I've done in Nicaragua. So kind of going back to the beginning, this is me at the very beginning. We were just talking kind of off the chat about how we love jewelry and creating, and from a very young age, this was always my go-to, was grabbing my mom's jewelry and her clothes and shoes, but mainly jewelry to play around with. And it's funny how that's kind of circled back to be a big thing in my life. I'm Swiss. I grew up in England. I was born in Germany, and so I have multiple roots, and I feel like I come from very different cultures, although as a whole European. And after university, I moved out to Nicaragua. On the way, I went via Venezuela and Costa Rica, two countries that I worked in, and then I also traveled in Southeast Asia, and before eventually returning back to Nicaragua to work. I went to university for History of Art and Latin American Studies. My first job after university was in Costa Rica, where I was focused on building community programs and volunteer environmental projects. It was about building bridges between the school and community to bring them together, to spark interest around the environment, and particularly around conservation. And this sparked my interest for community relationship building. And after Costa Rica, I moved to Nicaragua, where I started to work for a Canadian organization called Schoolbox, focused more on the side of community building. I was actually working with communities to assess their needs. I worked with 15 communities initially in Nicaragua. This was back in 2008. It's quite a long time ago. And my brief with Schoolbox was to work with the communities to figure out what was the barrier to education. Why were children not going to school? And I was responsible for liaising with the Nicaraguan Ministry of Education on behalf of the NGO to figure out, like, how could we solve the problem of kids in these communities not going to school. And one of the things that Schoolbox did was they built schools and libraries and then ran like sports programs in order to engage the children in coming to school, and that is how they would capture them to then start going to school. They would do that through sports. So through alternative programs, they would capture the children's attention to go to the school in a physical spot, and then eventually they would bring them into the education system. And I thought this was an interesting model because it showed how through different activities you could engage children or communities with education. One of the things that I became more interested in after working in Venezuela and Costa Rica and Nicaragua, where I initially worked on programs focused on supporting children to access mainstream education. Having worked with those communities, I became more interested in answering the question of what happens if you don't get captured by one of these support programs as a child. what happens if you don't get captured by a sports program, you don't get sponsored, you don't have the money at home to go to school, you don't have people pushing you to go to school, like what happens to that child? And I met Anita a little over 10 years ago now, so a couple of years after being in Nicaragua. And this is Anita. I met her when she was 15 years old, and she was a mother to two. And she lived in La Chureca in Nicaragua, which at the time was the largest trash dump in Central America. And it's just on the outskirts of Managua, the capital city of Nicaragua. And La Chureca is actually in plain view of the entire city of Managua. Managua is a city, I'm not sure if anyone here on this call has been to Nicaragua, but it's a city that's on hills. So from many vantage points, you could see La Chureca. And there was smoke billowing out of it 24/7 that came from the trash self-combusting. And Anita had spent all of her life in this community. And it was where she went to school, it's where she made friends, it's where she played in the streets, just like any other child. But Anita, age 12, stopped going to school because she moved in with her boyfriend, age 12, and he did not allow her to finish her studies. He didn't want her to find a different opportunity. And so she became quite isolated. She was isolated from her circle of friends. She was isolated from education, and he was controlling the opportunities she had in order to kind of further her own future. And although, we can see La Chureca from the city, Anita can also see the city from the landfill. And so she can also see that there are other possibilities out there. And when I met her, age 15, she was looking for a job in the city. And it's only actually a half-hour walk. So a half-hour walk, not a drive, a half-hour walk from the trash dump to one of the busiest parts of the city, where there's a huge main road where she was, with lots of restaurants and bars and shops. And she was going knocking on doors that displayed vacancies. But so far, when I met her, every door she knocked on was basically closed in her face, often without even being invited to complete a job application, because her ID stated that she was a resident of La Chureca and no one wanted to hire her. So she was looking for an opportunity to get a job so she could support her kids and forge a different life to the one she was living. And she shared with me that if her community had access to programs that supported them into employment, they could solve their own problem. I'm not sure if this video, is it playing? The video? No. Well, this is Anita. It's a translation of what she's saying, but it's a slipper of when I interviewed her like 10 years ago, and age 15, and she said that if we could get a job, if we had access to opportunities to get a job, we could solve our own problems and take care of our own future. And this impacted me in the fact that it was just so simple, and the fact that she just said, all I want is an opportunity in order to solve my own problems. I don't need any other help. I just need the job. I need that opportunity. So I decided to try and help her find a job. So I went to different part of town, to different restaurants, different cafes, to ask if they would be willing to hire this girl that was, in Spanish there's a word called pilas puestas, which is a bit like charged batteries. She's like ready, raring to go. She'll do anything. She's super intelligent, quick to pick up things. And even though I could vouch for her, I came up against the same barrier that Anita faced. I asked around at different businesses, and they simply said they did not hire people from that community. And interestingly enough, many said, oh, if she's from that community, I'm sorry, but she can't be trusted. Mm-hmm. And many times I was told that it was Anita and her family's choice to live in that community. And I was told, again, people said that there are plenty of opportunities, but that was their choice to be there. But my question was, but if she can't get a job to get out of that community, is it really her choice? So just like her partner, society was defining for Anita where she belonged. And she was being told she could not choose to belong to another group, another zip code. She couldn't even choose to belong to the labor market. And she wanted to belong to a different community to access opportunities for her life that would change it. And all she was looking for was a job. And it really struck me, just the story of Anita, not necessarily, but in the moment that I met her, it was the story of so many parents of the children in the communities that I'd previously worked in, of seeing how hard people have strived to get a job and simply couldn't because somehow they had the wrong address, or they were from the wrong community, or they didn't have the right connections. And opportunity was not based on a fact, on a choice that Anita made, let's say. It was others deciding for her where she belonged. And that decision from society meant that she did not have access to employment opportunities. It was not her choice, yet she was being told that it was. And we were talking to Anita that this sense of belonging and not belonging, the difference between being able to belong and not being able to belong, and how this can affect your life. This is when I decided that we've got to find another way to try and get Anita to find a job. And perhaps it was kind of the blatant proximity of the landfill to the city that really got under my skin, of saying, you know, like, but it's just here. They're half an hour walk away from here. Like, technically, you can see this community and you're deciding it doesn't belong to this city, when in fact, it's where everyone's trash goes and it's a huge part of how the city functions. So I decided to try and build a solution, a bridge to connect, if you will, Anita and other women in her community to opportunity. And this is where the story of Extraordinary Women begins. So at the time I was working for Schoolbox, and I got to know another NGO that worked in La Chureca, and in my spare time, I basically went every single weekend for about 6 months to La Chureca, together with a community coordinator from another organization called Juntas Contigo, to talk to women and families in the community and learn from them about, like, what were the barriers to getting a job and what it meant to them to have a job, because it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for everyone, and what it was that they wanted to learn, and specifically what it meant to them to get a job, like I said, but also what would you do with that job? You know, like, would you be able to change anything? Would you even want a job? And the answers were mixed. And to cut a long story short, because it's very long, because like I said, this was, you know, like almost 10 years ago. As a result of that, like 6 months of piloting, I set up a job skill training based on improving literacy and based around creativity. So what we did was we set up classes to improve literacy of men and women. And in order for them to be able to come to the classes, we would give them a small scholarship so that they were being paid for their time to study. Because otherwise, if they didn't have any income, which would normally come from searching for trash, which they would resell, they wouldn't be able to come and take the training. In summation, the pilot program was 8 months, and at the end of it, we decided to only support women and not men and women. This is something I can go into more depth later, but it was one of the things that most stood out, that in a community that was so marginalized, that had so many social problems, bringing men and women into the same space was bringing aggressors and victims into the same space and it wasn't allowing the women to thrive. It wasn't enabling them to have the space that they needed away from someone that was controlling their decisions, in order to learn and develop their skill set. We also found that on average, 80% of the men that received the support would spend it on things just for them, and 100% of the women that received support would split it. They would hide like half of what they got, which was a food basket and some money. They would hide it at a friend's house or a family member's house, and then take it to the other half to their family, and then trickle it into the household. So it was just seeing how this worked, how the opportunity worked, how they managed their income, and how they managed to support their families with this opportunity. We basically decided to support just women. And what we do is now, it used to be called Earth Education Project. I don't even mention that anymore. It's now Extraordinary Women. We rebranded years ago. And what we do is we run courses that train them in job skills. So looking at interview techniques, CV, and then we also do psychological support and job placement programs. And the main aim is so that they can become emotionally and financially independent. And with that independence, they can build their own brighter futures. So what we believe is that education and work bring sustainable change to the lives of disadvantaged women and the lives of them around it. You know, like I mentioned, that small example of with the pilot program of them having that opportunity of a food basket and a small amount of income, they changed their families' lives in a short amount of time. And the way that we achieve this is we don't just teach kind of skills and soft skills. We combine it with psychological support. So every woman that goes through the program has a personalized psychological support with our team psychologist and also our community coordinators. So the courses last 3 months, and then each woman receives 6 months of personalized follow-up, and that's why it really works. And it's simply based around the fact, you know, like what I was mentioning at the beginning, like Anita wanted an opportunity, and we created that opportunity simply because we believe if you have the access to the right opportunity, it has the power to change a woman's life and the lives around her. And now we don't just work with La Chureca, we work with women in Nicaragua, central Nicaragua, the Caribbean coast, and we now also run courses in Honduras, Belize, and Guatemala. And it's specifically based for women between 18 and 34 years of old, who have not had the opportunity to finish school and have not been able to secure a job. And as I mentioned, we started with job skill training and job placement, and we still run that course, but we also support women who are running small businesses. So it focuses on soft skills, financial planning, and also then life planning and self-esteem. And that is really, really important component of learning how to manage your money, learning how to plan ahead, learning how to actually think that your life is more than just today. This is very hard for people that are surviving on a day-to-day basis to project into the future. And that's a big part of why the program works, because we work with them to think about their goals and how they want to achieve them and to commit to the long-term change. 95% of the women who graduate from the job skills training program are still employed more than 5 years on. And this is a short snapshot of the topics that we look at for women that run their own businesses, which is more focused on the skills and sales and promotion. But for example, we're talking about women that run businesses that when they come to us make $40 or $60 a week. You know, these are informal businesses, they're not registered. And again, we look very much at kind of like the root cause of like why she's working, what is working for her with her business and what is not. And the most of the time it's like how to calculate costs and how to sell. So that's what we focus on for them. And you can see that basically a lot of the women that come to us have no real knowledge about setting up a business. I mean, they do it out of necessity. So we don't try and go macro on them and say like, oh, have you got a business strategy? No, we go very basic, bite-sized steps of, okay, you need to sell, but how much does it, you know, if you're selling, for example, one woman sells tortillas, like how much does it cost you to make these tortillas, for example? And when you sell that tortilla, you don't get that whole income of that tortilla into your household. It's actually about half. So, you know, like how do you say that just put it back into your business, and how do you earn yourself a salary in order to buy your kids shoes and the things that you need for the house. I think this is working. So the organization is having the impact that we want it to have, and it's now in its 12th year. But one of the very real struggles of running an organization is raising funds, is sustainability. Running these programs is not cost-free, but it is extremely hard to raise funds for charity. It's also hard to connect people with causes when obviously there is so much going on in everyone's own communities. So in 2014, a way that I decided to tackle this kind of 5 years after I set up the NGO is I set up Chureca Chic, which is a luxury jewelry brand that employed women from La Chureca, specifically graduates from the Extraordinary Women training program, to create handmade pieces from upcycled materials, and with the profits from Chureca Chic to help support the fundraising efforts of Extraordinary Women. And Chureca Chic, as you can see, tells a completely different story to that of the organization. It tells a story of craftsmanship, it tells a story of luxury, desire. It caters towards women aged between 36 to 50 with spending power. And that's who we target. Yet it bears the name of the trash dump. And that for me was important to use the name of La Chureca specifically for Nicaragua, because that's where we started the label, in order to break down preconceptions on a national level about that community that cannot do anything, in inverted commas, and to also break down preconceptions that recycling cannot be high end. So we had a team of 15 artisans employed and trained by Chureca Chic, and we ended up becoming a household name in Nicaragua in a very short amount of time. And that was very interesting to me, because 5 years into the NGO, we were obviously struggling to raise funds, but we were managing to get it through. But we needed to have this other source of income, and we needed to have another voice in order to tell these stories. And it was very interesting that this brand managed to cut through to so many people that weren't hearing about what we were doing with Extraordinary Women. And the same people that had not wanted to hire Anita were wanting to listen to what is Chureca Chic about, like why are they using this name of La Chureca. And in 2014, we actually ended up winning the first national award for Chureca Chic social impact and innovation, which was being channeled through Extraordinary Women. And in 2015, 16, and 17, we continued to be recognized and awarded for the work at a national level. And I think for me, that is like a living example of the power of socially orientated business affecting long-term and lasting change together with community projects. And like I said, like Chureca Chic was able to be that voice for the organization as well, not just for the women, but it was be able to be the voice for the organization. And in turn, it meant that we ended up being able to earn more funds through the partnership with Chureca Chic in order to help more women like Anita have access to different opportunities. And this is oh, I don't think it's working. Well, I invite you to go on YouTube, Google Chureca Chic, you can see the video. And again, this is just one of our last collections that we sold, and this is made entirely out of recycled silver. But in our in the marketing materials and stuff for Chureca Chic, we don't use the same things that Extraordinary Women does, but we do tell that story. When you get our products, we tell the story of where we came from, who we support, why it works, and how it helps. But this is a lot more attractive to many people than asking for a donation to an NGO. And then as part of the venture, we ended up opening a cafe and a shop called Casa Chureca Chic, very original, where we would train and hire women like Anita from La Chureca and other marginalized areas. We would train them to work in the service industry. So Chureca Chic front store, like flagship store, also became a training center for women in being baristas and shop assistants. And it was an extension of the NGO program. So it meant that after they graduated from Extraordinary Women, they got an extra training and they could then go on to work at other restaurants and cafes. And it was a space to sell the Chureca Chic products and offer coffee, food, art, and bring together. And that the cafe business model is a hybrid model with the sales of coffee, events, jewelry, all helping to fund the NGO as well. So it wasn't just the jewelry; it was just all the activities that they did. A donation was factored into everything that the house did. And then Chureca Chic also housed the offices for Extraordinary Women. So Chureca Chic as a business took on like kind of the rent and electricity so that Extraordinary Women could have their offices in there. And that, I think, is a really good way that enterprises can work with charities sometimes, to think of a different way, think a bit outside the box about how you can support community projects as a business as well. And it was actually in the same neighborhood where I had gone knocking on doors to ask if they would hire Anita. And it was a beautiful way for us to break down barriers in society, because, as I mentioned, we had art all over the walls. That wasn't just ours, it was different artists. We gave them spaces to sell, to talk about, to exhibit, and have coffee. And Anita worked at the cafe for a while as well and served coffee every day to the same community of people that hadn't wanted to hire her in the first place. And for me, that is a real example about how we used art in order to break down barriers within a community, and in order for everyone to feel like they belonged. Like, we created a space for everyone from all sectors of society to come together and feel like they belonged. And that is a real big part of what drives me. Like, I know that being human is about belonging, and I feel we have to do more in community to help others belong. And and I think we have to see kind of what is in our power and in our daily life where we are not allowing others to belong with our own actions, and we have to constantly reflect on that. So today, Anita is actually a restaurant manager, and she's studying to finish high school in her spare time. She goes every single Saturday. She has 2 years left to finish high school. She is 24 years old now, 25 actually, and she dreams of becoming an architect. And I think creating these impact enterprises is about building and facilitating connections within society. And we can often be, as I was mentioning before, disconnected from the people that we cross in our path every single day. Like, for example, the barista that makes your favorite coffee that you pick up on the way to school in the morning or the way to work. Like, you don't really know what's going on with them. And yet we all need each other along our journey in order for everyone to be able to thrive. And in order for that to happen, we all have to have access to opportunities. and that is where my personal commitment comes from, is to make is to help sustainable business and to make it the norm in our communities by facilitating innovations and models that ensure like long-term change and belonging, because after all, that's what makes us human, isn't it? Yeah, so that's a bit about where we're at. I think I will stop sharing the screen. Did that work? Sorry, I don't think I pressed it properly. Here we go. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Paltzer. As Andrea shared with us today, she believes challenging traditional forms of development and in social entrepreneurship as a solution to persistent social and environmental problems. Again, in 2009, she founded the charity XtraOrdinary Women, which she spoke about, shared with us today, an alternative job training program for disadvantaged women in Nicaragua. And in 2013, the Chureca Chic brand was born as part of the path of social entrepreneurship. Andrea is committed to facilitating opportunities that drive sustainable change. Thank you so much for inspiring our audience here today. Any questions, any comments? I think your work is unbelievable, really empowering these women. I had one question, actually. I'm always full of questions, but this one, did they get the support they needed from within their community and outside their community? Because at one point you said that the communities outside felt that they're there because they want to be there. They can get out if they want to get out, kind of thing. Did that mindset change when they saw these women were working, were trying to?
It's a really good question, actually, and I would say yes, they did change. I mentioned a little bit like the pilot program, about how kind of I mentioned that Anita, she moved in with her boyfriend when she was 12. She had 2 kids by the time I met her, and he was controlling her access to education and opportunity. She has a very loving family, Anita. She has very loving parents that have always been there for her, actually. And, unlike many women who didn't have a family looking out for her, Anita did. But part of the issue, if you want to use that word, is that it was normal for girls of that age to move out and move in with their boyfriends. And I'm not going to go in there and say this isn't normal. The whole point of creating that program was to show an opportunity, like the opportunity that you want, that you think is out there. In this case, for Anita, is actually out there, and you can still get it being in this community. And if I go back to mentioning the point about the pilot program, I thought it would work initially for men and women because they're all part of a community. Like, I don't necessarily, like, we need everyone to form a community, it's not us against them or separating people out. But it didn't work at first just because of these ingrained beliefs that women had certain places, and they did think we were trying to radicalize the women and that we were trying to get them to disregard their responsibilities. And it was very difficult at first. The team and I were threatened. We have been in all sorts of difficult situations. But I would like to say that now the women that are referred to our program are actually their husbands referring them to the program, or their brothers, or their family members. And so we have, over a decade, managed to change that perception that she should only be at home. It's a change of perception of understanding that if she has financial and emotional independence, everyone in the household can work together. And it's not just, like I mentioned, we do psychological support. It's not just for her, it's for her families. So in situations whereby it's just certain barriers, certain cultural and societal barriers that are holding these women back and their families, we work with them and their families in order to overcome these barriers. And so yes, like it has changed. And we have I love it because we do have a couple men now ask, like, when are we going to get the Extraordinary Men program? So I would say, like, that is a big example of how, like, the preconceptions can be broken down within the community. Obviously there are some cases where the women were suffering from extreme violence and abuse, and that is something that we would work with with partner NGOs in order for the women to get the proper support that they need in those situations.
And in a way, you're empowering them from breaking that cycle, right? They then become the means for change. They're inspiring their own children, their other members of the family, other members of their community.
Yeah, they become leaders in their community. They become advocates for change. They have a voice. And I think the most important part to look at it is that these women make a direct change to the lives of their children. They might come from generations of their families not going to school, not having access to opportunities in education, but the first thing they do when they get a job is they start paying for school. And about 60% of them, like Anita, they actually go back to school in their spare time. So I think that direct change that you can see in their children is also a testament to what happens when someone gets the opportunity that they're looking for. And that's all we do is we build a bridge, like we connect them with an opportunity, but they do the rest. Like, we don't do the course for them, we don't take their job interviews, we don't do their job for them. So it's very much showing that, like, if they have that right opportunity, then yes, like it is possible for them to make the change that they're looking for.
I put in the chat the website to Chureca Chic.
Oh yes, thanks.
Yes, please, everyone should take a look. It's very beautiful, and from what we understood here today, this here helps support your organization, correct?
Yes, yeah, Chureca Chic, we actually have the price structure on the website, so you can go and see how it is split up. It's very transparent, like we say what percentage we spend on marketing, on shipping, on packaging, and what percentage is the donation for every piece. And so we work on a model that every single piece includes a donation. So we don't just necessarily work on like a percentage of profits. It's actually kind of one of our costs is the donation, if you like. So yeah, every single piece includes a donation to Extraordinary Women.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Carolina?
Yes, I have so many, but I also would like to give a couple of minutes available for the other audience members. From my perspective, I would like to hear a bit more from the administrative part as much as possible, because we might have some, let's say, imagine like arts administrators or business majors on the call, or maybe watching the video later, that would like to become an entrepreneur with a social conscience, right? From that angle, could you expand a bit more on, like, let's say from growing it from 0 to stage 5, and then from 5 to 10, and now that you're at this level that you started with Extraordinary Women, pass it on with the connection of Chureca Chic, like what's the next step, right? Like, how are you perhaps proliferating the brand in other countries in Central America or abroad as well? We'll start there, and then I have others to follow.
Okay, so yeah, I'll break it down into little different bits. But if we start with starting a not-for-profit, I mean, it's in the name, isn't it? Like, starting a not-for-profit it's a charity organization. It's the business structure of a charity is not designed to make profit. The original structure of a charity, right? And so, there are very strict like rules and laws. I'm not that up to date with the laws in the US, but for example, in the UK, it's very strict. If you start a charity, no one can earn anything profit-wise from a charity. But you can have a trading arm, and many charities do have trading arms. Like, I'm sure you've heard of Oxfam or Save the Children. Those big organizations, they have trading arms like Oxfam, Save the Children. You might have heard of Save the Children. I'm not sure how big Oxfam is in the US, but you know, they have charity stores, right? So they have trading arms where they literally have warehouses full of clothes, and their charity stores like deal with the secondhand clothes, which is now super in because it's vintage. And that's how some charities work. In the way of Extraordinary Women, we have a charity structure whereby we raise funds, and we spend all the funds that are raised on community programs. So we're constantly raising funds, and raising funds, like I mentioned, is exhausting because it's not sustainable. Because year on year, you're trying to get those donors to donate again. And it is a bit like a business, right? Because you have to sell your cause, and you have to lock in donors and partners for a long time. And that is perfectly doable. We have long-term partnerships with foundations that raise funds for us, and we have corporate partners. But eventually those foundations tend to only work on like 3 to 5 year cycles maximum, because then they want to support other causes. So if you're looking to start a charity, you have to have that very clear about like, what is your fundraising structure going to be? And it has to be constant. And it is very hard for small NGOs to raise funds, because you're constantly applying for grants. You probably have no money to pay a fundraiser, so it's probably your community coordinator or your director or anyone that works on the team. Everyone's writing grants and bids, and it's disorganized, and it is hard. So out of that came the idea about, well, if we set up a social enterprise that works towards the same end, but is a completely separate identity and is for profit, we could make a partnership with that enterprise. But I set up the enterprise to help raise funds for the same programs, right? So Chureca Chic is a for profit, but all of our profit goes back into, after costs, goes back into community organizations. And so we put that in our articles of association when we started. And for social enterprises, there are lots of opportunities now in the US, there's lots of opportunities in the UK for this structure to be a social enterprise. Again, for example, in the UK, if you are a social enterprise, 80% of your profits has to, by law, go into a community project or your community impact, whether it's environment or people. So there are these structures now that work towards that. And I think if you're going to set up a business to have community impact, yes, it is really important to think about what community impact you're going to have, but it's also important to think about your product, because at the end of the day, no one is going to buy your product unless this product is a good product. And so it has to be done with a business head. It has to be done with strategy. You have to have your projections. You have to get someone on board to work with numbers. And you also have to test your product. I mean, I think part of the mistakes that I made at the beginning with Chureca Chic, it wasn't easy. I mean, we started making Christmas cards from recycled paper. We didn't necessarily start with jewelry. We quickly moved to jewelry, but we started with recycled paper. You can go, if you scroll through like all the years of Chureca Chic you'll see that I never deleted it because it's part of our story, but you'll see what we made at the beginning. And it was not a great product. People would buy it for the story, but they wouldn't buy again. And that was a problem. So that's why I very quickly moved to looking to doing partnerships with designers. And I applied for scholarships left, right, and center to learn about design and fashion and the industry of fashion and how it worked. And I was very lucky because I did get some scholarships and I got some sponsorship to go to trade shows. There were a lot of programs out there. And yeah, so was able to get that opportunity to go and learn and also be shameless. Like I knocked on doors of designers, like I'd never met them, just saying like, I need help. I don't, like design isn't my thing, but I need this design to be good because this is what we want to do with this funding. And at the time, we were one of the first people to do this. I mean, we're talking like a very long time ago, like 10 years ago. So it was novel at the time as well. And so people were interested in listening and supporting. And I mean, to be honest, like, I like it when people ask me like, how did you do it? What did you do? Like, I'm willing to help, right? So I think you will find that more people are willing to help than you think. But you do have to go out there and ask. And then the business structure of Chureca Chic, just to finish answering your question, like I said, we had a store, we had cafes, we had events. It wasn't enough to just sell jewelry. We had 4 different streams of income. And I think that is important to remember, that some businesses can have 1 stream of income, but you've always got to have like multiple streams of income, multiple products, right? So you can kind of figure out which one is working. And we tried it on the go, which again isn't necessarily the best way to do it, but that's how we did it. We tried it on the go, and we literally had like 4 different streams of income. And our strongest still remained the jewelry and the cafe, but we did make money with events as well, and exhibitions and stuff like that. But yeah, we had multiple streams to bring people in.
It's marketing, it's business, it's public relations, it's design.
Yeah, it's everything.
Everything.
And it's everything, because it needs to be. I think the story isn't enough, right? The story only goes so far, and then like as they say here, like the proof is in the pudding. So it has to go further than the concept. It has to give customers what they want. It has to give them an experience.
We do have a network of presenters and some that may collaborate with you, so we'll share that with you later. Right, Carolina?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. Another follow-up, if I may, it's that it is very hard to change the mindset of people, right? And here in ARTIVISM, we have come to realize that a lot of the social matters that our presenters touch upon, the bottom line is basically that, right? The mindset, and why people are kind of like following in the steps sometimes of these traditions or so. My question here comes, how, if you have perhaps come across the idea of, on the other side, when people are seeing that the Chureca people are progressing, right? Have you seen any pushback from the other parts of society to not support that growth? Because, as we all know, sometimes certain things are systemic, so that the system in place keeps on working, right?
To be honest, we didn't. To be honest, what was very impactful was the pushback at the beginning came with the name. It came with saying, like, why would you want to publicize this community? People were kind of ashamed that this community existed, for all the reasons that I mentioned. They didn't trust it. And so at the beginning, it was a big pushback on, like, why on earth would you use this name? What are you doing? You're not from here. You don't understand. But my conviction was, this is the point. I want to create a conversation around this. And I just want you to look at what's happening, at like what they're making. And as the products got better and better, those ended up being our clients. Our biggest critics ended up being our clients. And it became, like I mentioned, a bit of a household name. So then it was something that people coveted. It was like, oh, I want a piece of Chureca Chic. And they became proud of it. And I think, to be honest, like I mentioned with the men in the community at the beginning, there was pushback. But ultimately, when you just calmly go along with what you're doing, I don't think you necessarily have to you don't have to change people's minds. I think you have to go into it without expectation, and you have to go into it with your own conviction about your own actions. You can't do things expecting something in return, and you can't get mad or frustrated if things don't go the way that you want them to, or people aren't reacting the way that you want them to. You have to be convicted enough in your own actions, with foundation, right? With the fact that it's working, or it can work. And then I think, like, the critics will come. Any criticism, critics will turn around. And then also, like, any publicity is good publicity. There was a lot of publicity at the beginning of, like, what are you doing with this name and this community? And that helped because people started to look and listen. And I think also what was interesting when we had the cafe, people would talk to the girls, because we only worked with women, so it was all women. People would talk to the women making the coffee and say, oh, where are you from? And they would actually say with pride, we're from La Chureca. And they would also have to deal with the comments of, oh, you don't look like you are, which is difficult comments to deal with. And like I said, we had psychologists in the house, so we would always work with them to go to be able to deal with and answer those questions. But it was, you know, we subtly just changed the narrative ourselves without ramming it down anyone's throat, you know. And I think it was the way that we did it that it worked, that eventually it was accepted. Oh, sorry, my computer fell.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms.
You're
Paltzer.
welcome. Thank you.
On Monday, just as a reminder, on Monday, October 24th, we will have Margarita Espada talk about her theatrical piece, What Killed Marcelo Lucero, a work created with the community as a response to the hate crime committed by young white men in Patchogue, Long Island, New York, against Marcelo Lucero, an Ecuadorian immigrant in 2008. On October 31st, we will have Dean Lally of Adelphi University, Rachel Feldman, Marley Koensenberg. They will be presenting social justice, theater, and teaching. Thank you to Dr. Stephanie Lake, to the web team at Adelphi University for always posting our events and changing them the many times we we need to change them. Our sponsors, Sync for Hope, Adelphi University, and Gottesman Libraries, Teachers College, Columbia University. Carolina?
Yes, and you can find more information about this series and past and upcoming events at the website. That is adelphi.edu.art/artivism, or you can follow Facebook, Instagram, that is at Artivism for Shared Humanity, or just put on the Google search Artivism and Adelphi. Our YouTube channel is also Artivism for Shared Humanity. If you would like to get involved in this ongoing initiative, please contact the Artivism team at artivism@adelphi.edu. Also for the spring, now for all of you hearing this presentation, we'll have a fashion show that is wearable art with a purpose. And we do hope, Ms. Paltzer, that you and the Chureca Chic, all the models and designers and everybody involved in that marvelous initiative participates in this open call. We're looking for models, designers, and also DJs. Please, if you're interested, reach out to the Artivism team.
And if you'd like to participate, you can, and you know, of course, there's a cost in shipping over material and artworks. If you send us an image via email that's of good quality, we will print them out along with the little artist statement and display that.
Fab, that sounds great.
Yes, I would like to take a second here to thank Ms. Paltzer. And of course, we can't let you go before we ask you for your key takeaway from today.
My key takeaway?
Yes, we usually ask the Artivism presenters just one key takeaway for action for the audience, that you know, if they have the same passion as you to start perhaps a business with this social kind of like mindfulness and structure, right, that will make a sustainable impact in the community that they're you know, they want to address. That's one thing, but I'm just saying, overall, what would be one key takeaway from your presentation today as an action item?
Well, I think one thing that I have learned along the way is to constantly be open to innovating, to changing what you're doing in order to get the desired effect. So be open to listening to criticism and learning from others. Particularly if you're looking to help a community, listen to that community and figure out what they need and how you can be a facilitator. Because it's not about you, it's about the impact and how you can have that impact and be a part of change. So yeah, I would say be open to listening, talk, and innovate, because your idea is going to change a million times along the way. Don't push back.
That's a wonderful, wonderful advice, definitely. And thank you for being our artist today. It was a pleasure
Thank
to
you for
have this
having me.
opportunity to collaborate with you. We hope that it's one of many to come.
Thank you.
And
it was an honor. Thank you so much.
thank you for the audience for participating as well. And Professor Archie, let's give her a shout out today as well. Come on, team.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.